Hey everyone, I got some upsetting news for you. Homer and Marge are fighting again. You see, Homer did something thoughtless, and Marge is questioning being married to such a selfish man. But don't worry, they'll kiss and make up in the end, probably after some shenanigan. Yeah, so The Simpsons has done this plotline a lot. They're a family sitcom after all, so of course there's gonna be husband and wife fussin' and a feudin'. But oh my gosh, The Simpsons has gone to this well so many times over the course of 35 years. So it made me curious exactly how many there were. By my count, there are 76 major Homer-Marge marriage crisis episodes. That constitutes about 10% of the entire series, meaning you're getting 2, maybe 3 run-ins per year. That is a lot of marital drama. And this isn't even counting their minor squabbles. I'm talking stories specifically about their relationship. Somehow, nearly half of them involve some weird love triangle. So, for today's purposes, we're gonna set aside all the Jacques and Lurlines and Princess Cashmere's for now, and focus in on Homer and Marge's internal feuds as a couple. Don't worry, we'll definitely talk sexy strawberry time in a later video. It's important we first understand the Homer and Marge dynamic without those outside distractions. Like, what is the usual beef between them? How do the writers keep challenging them as a couple? And whose fault are most of their disagreements? Oh, wait a minute, we know the answer to that last question already. It's Homer's fault. It's always Homer's fault. Okay, so you want to hear how one-sided Homer and Marge's feuds are? We are about to go over 25 examples of Homer pissing off Marge due to some blunder. You know how many times Marge upsets Homer? 4. 4 times. Homer, I knew you were inconsiderate, but I wasn't expecting it to be that bad. I mean, think about it. The very first episode ever produced starts out with Homer taking Marge for granted and her being advised to dump that loser. This was supposed to be our series introduction to these two, Marge furious with Homer, and Homer desperately trying to make it up to her. Luckily, this is just an Act 1 fight, and then it's sexy blue thing time. This is our general framework for the classic Homer blunder plot, although it can be instigated by a few different things. For example, Homer humiliating Marge in front of others. Let's go back to that ill-fated house party and those peanuts at the bottom. Or how about when Homer teaches a learning annex course and reveals all her secrets? Marge literally warns Homer in both examples, but due to his overexuberance, totally disregards it. It's difficult to always trust Homer, especially when he's drinking. As much as we all try, it's hard to forget that time he framed Marge for a DUI. Each of these examples beat up on Homer's character, but struggle in demonstrating any meaningful change. Sometimes a grand gesture, sometimes a subversive speech, and sometimes vacuously staring at each other. Homer's drinking became such a constant problem that in a flash forward, Lisa recognizes it's about to break them up and finally gets him to quit. Never doubt the persuasive skills of Lisa. The writers are fond of the grand gesture to clean up Homer's messes. For a status quo comedy, it's a convenient plot device. We do have a couple instances that subvert this dynamic, however. In season 18, when Ice Cream Man Homer destroys Marge's art exhibit, he repeatedly apologizes and shows how sorry he feels. But instead of the grand Homer gesture, it's Marge who shows the world what he means to her. She understands he was trying to be at her show and forgives him off-screen. The switcheroo could have been conveyed better, but is a refreshing approach to this tired formula. In A Serious Flanders, Marge is disgusted by Homer's greed and selfishness toward Ned. She actually says they're only staying together for the kids. But instead of proving his selflessness to Marge, he helps Ned Flanders in secret, only reconciling because Marge follows him. These stories show slightly more grace toward Homer, despite his many flaws. In some cases, Homer simply gets overexcited about the topic of the week, and it creates a rift. This week, he's obsessed with this mobile home, has moved into the backyard, and Marge absolutely hates it. Now they have a carpentry business, except Homer is hogging all the credit. Now Homer's excited about having 8 weeks paid vacation, and keeps it a secret from Marge until she finds out. Definitely the most extreme example of this is when Homer becomes a gun nut, being horribly irresponsible and lying about getting rid of it. These episodes tend to have much wackier and more action-packed conclusions. It's not enough for Homer to quit his new hobby, their lives have to be in danger. I do like how low stakes some of their fights are. Like, I enjoy a good action set piece as much as the next guy, but also give me these petty domestic squabbles. I'm a big fan of this season 19 B-plot, where Homer forgets Marge's eye color. She literally refuses to let him see them until he remembers. I love how spiteful and exaggerated this is, the exact sort of thing old married couples argue about. Or how about that time where Homer gets obsessed with smart glasses and brings them into the bedroom? In this case, it turns into a story about Homer finding out Marge is venting about him in therapy. Homer ultimately gets over it, realizing how much the therapy is helping her. Then there's that time that Homer watches this Stranger Things knockoff without her. Now that is an unforgivable sin in our streaming world. She's gonna have to wait another 10 years to watch the next season with him. This one ends with Homer whisking her off her feet in quite a romantic dance sequence. I forgot how sweet this ending is. This whole section is about how much Homer sucks, but he really nailed the landing on this one. Like many husbands, sometimes he simply puts his foot in his mouth. When Edna and Skinner are breaking up, Homer tries brushing their own issues under the rug, which causes Marge to question if their marriage is an illusion. When Bart and Mary are on the rocks, Homer generalizes about all women and gets kicked out of the house. When Marge starts doing drag and hosting Tupperware parties for these gay guys, Homer barges in there and ruins the whole thing for her. These tend to be the weirdest and most contrived Homer-Marge fights, and always end in some grand gesture. I mean, Homer literally does drag to better understand her newly found sense of empowerment. Of the three, this conflict is easily the most nuanced, since Homer, actually considers her point of view. The other two are mostly hot garbage tacked onto someone else's story. I think the most disturbing thing about Homer is how much he ignores her and takes her for granted. You see this with couples over time, as they become comfortable and fall into a rut. Like when Marge does that streetcar play in season 4, Homer barely even notices or cares. He doesn't take an interest in her life. It's just some irrelevant thing the wife is doing. By season 10, Marge is calling him out for not treating her special anymore, compared to Apu. Once again, taking her for granted. Their dinner dates have become stale, as Homer is more interested in the food than making conversation with her. Marge has gotten so many apology cards at this point that she refuses to forgive him. This episode goes to some rather kinky places, but the Simpsons' favorite fetish is clearly self-awareness. That at this point, after so many years, Marge forgives him because he keeps trying to make things right. She appreciates his dogged devotion and effort. It's like the less depressing version of this ending. Personally, at this point, I'm feeling totally exhausted beating up on Homer this long. We get it, Homer's the worst. So let's leave it there for now. Thankfully, there are a few examples where everything is not actually his fault. Ah, the old misunderstanding plot. Everybody loves a good misunderstanding plot. They are not frustrating at all. So there are 5 more examples of Marge getting mad at Homer, but this time it's for something not totally in his control. Like, let's consider the chili cook-off episode, the very first misunderstanding crisis. It starts out similar to the War of the Simpsons, with Marge giving him a warning about his past drunken behavior. So, Homer doesn't drink. Sure, he holds court as the Chili King and goes insanity pepper crazy, but he didn't mean to guzzle down all that beer. It was just unlucky circumstances. But, like other Homer blunders, Marge feels humiliated and lets him know it. This episode takes a more introspective journey overall. It's not nag, 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 please forgive me. It puts some blame on Homer and forces him to work through who his soulmate is. And it lets Marge meet him halfway, proving that she is. We see this dynamic again in I Won't Be Home for Christmas, where Homer promises he'll be home on Christmas Eve, but breaks it because Moe is feeling lonely. Marge, not understanding the reason, is furious and kicks him out. Homer once again goes through a journey of loneliness, punished by this misunderstanding. But this time, Marge has to go through her own journey of redemption, to go out there, find Homer, and apologize for the misunderstanding. I like this episode, but I do wish we got more of Marge's POV. We needed more self-reflection, of Marge assuming the worst of her husband. The previous section demonstrates that maybe he deserves these expectations, so this is a good use of a misunderstanding plot, subverting the well-established status quo. Unfortunately, they can't all be winners. Season 32's Christmas episode has a similar premise, where Marge tells Homer not to drink, and he accidentally gets blitzed, thanks to Lenny. Although it's clear it isn't Homer's fault, they make him go through a journey of atonement anyway. Let's banish him to Flanders' house to save the day, and prove something to Marge. There's no real introspection, no commentary about their relationship. Just a bunch of yearning and bad feelings. Bah humbug. There are 2 more examples where Homer hurts Marge's feelings, but a third party forces it to happen. In the flashback episode, The Way We Weren't, she stood up for their second date because he gets trapped in a fat camp. This causes a pain in her heart that isn't completely healed even to this present day. In Season 20's Wedding for Disaster, Homer misses their second wedding, which obviously devastates Marge. But only because Patty and Selma kidnap him and hold him in this saw torture chamber, in an attempt to get Marge to forget about him. The only reason he gets out is because they're won over by his wedding vows. Okay, I like that angle, that he's able to touch Patty and Selma's heart. But what the hell are we even doing here? Why is this the framing device for this kind of story? At least other misunderstandings happen directly between Homer and Marge. You can narrow in on their personal assumptions about each other. Here, Homer's just overcoming some other obstacle, while the writers figure out a gimmick to circle it back to his love of Marge. Marge herself gets further sidelined because she has no idea what is even happening. If you're gonna do a misunderstanding plot, at least give the characters some agency. Let's get Marge in the middle of them. Basically what I'm saying, we need more of these episodes. I said earlier, there are only 4 Homer-Marge fights where a Marge blunder serves as the foundation. That is already super imbalanced against Homer, but it's even worse than the numbers imply. Here are the 4 examples. Number 1. Marge's honesty ruins their lawsuit, which makes Homer resent her. Number 2. Homer discovers an old letter where Marge was upset by a terrible date. Homer feels unappreciated and moves out. Number 3. Marge disapproves of Lisa dating this Lucas kid and falling for someone like Homer. Homer naturally resents this implication. Number 4. Marge's dad left her $1,000 per month in his will, which Marge has been keeping a secret. You see what I mean? Homer's examples were like him destroying her art and framing her for a DUI and stuff. Whereas Homer's mad at Marge because she's too honest, or she was upset when Homer ruined their date. The nerve of her! In both of these examples, they make her do the grand gesture, the big apology at Moe's bar, hiring Weird Al to sing to him. I've literally had to rewatch the middle of 3 Gays of the Condo 3 times, just to remember what the hell Homer's problem with her is. Oh no, she resents me for the bad things I do. I do like that these examples prey upon Homer's flaws and how they create conflict with Marge, but they're not really Marge blunders, even if she quote-unquote causes the fight. They're more explorations of Homer's pettiness and neuroticism. They're entirely Homer-centric. Now, the example with the secret $1,000 per month fares better in this regard, because it makes some sense why Homer wouldn't like this secret being kept from him. He feels emasculated by his father-in-law, that he thinks he isn't good enough for her. The Homer-Marge dynamic is more minimized here, but it does provide insight about how Homer feels about his marriage. Somewhat surprisingly though, I think Season 25's Lucas contains the best application of this formula. Because instead of her father, it's Marge implicitly disapproving of Homer through Lisa. She repeatedly tells Homer she loves him, but doesn't want Lisa to end up with someone like him. That's a harsh thing to say to your significant other, and Homer should feel insulted by it. I like that the story builds upon those previous Homer blunders, that you understand why Marge has these complex feelings. When Marge apologizes, it feels like it's built upon something real, something true to her character. It's not making Marge jump through arbitrary hoops because Homer sucks. It's a genuine critique of what Marge is bringing into the marriage. There are a couple more examples that I'm going to put in this section because they're essentially mutual disagreements between them. In Break My Wife Please, Marge is stressed out after driving him around and resents how everything works out for him. So she hits him with her car. Homer's upset because he realizes she's subconsciously trying to hurt him. In The Telltale Pants, Marge sells Homer's inexplicably valuable pants to buy herself an expensive ring. When Homer finds out at the end, he's upset by the purchase. Even though both are upset at various points in these two cases, they place more of the blame on Homer. Break My Wife Please plays the Uno reverse card by reminding Homer all he's put her through, and has him do another grand gesture. Whereas in the Pants episode, Homer quickly remembers all she's done for him, and realizes she deserves to treat herself. Gee, I wonder how many more times Homer's gonna discover what he puts Marge through. The only Homer-Marge fight that's really on equal terms, at least in terms of the blame, is Postcards from the Wedge. Here, they argue about how to parent Bart, with Marge cutting him more slack. That's weird. I'm surprised there aren't more topical episodes that flirt with a marriage crisis. Marge obviously hates many of Homer's schemes, but they rarely become a relationship story. Whereas here, they have legitimate philosophical differences. They wrestle with the issues. It's a nice change of pace, putting them on a neutral battleground, not always fighting about who sucks more. In my opinion, the best Homer and Marge fights are the ones that live in their own heads. We need more of these. In this very fiery and combative video, let's cool off by looking at the insecurities and circumstances that have threatened their marriage. Obviously, with any couple, sometimes just time can affect the relationship. People inevitably fall into a rut. Look at grandpa versus sexual inadequacy, where the responsibilities as parents are hurting their sex life. And not even the sexy voice of Paul Harvey can spice things up. Good thing grandpa comes along to help Homer come along. Natural Born Kissers takes this one step further, that it's not only about the annoying kids and adult responsibilities, the actual spark between them is fading. They need to put themselves in risky and compromising situations just to get in the mood again. Both of these go in silly and cartoony directions, of course, but their foundation feels based in something real and relatable. The same can't be said for Camp Crustier, which is a giant mess of Homer and Marge sex issues. You see, Homer became more productive at work and ascribed it to his lack of physical romance. So he takes a vow of celibacy. Who even are these characters anymore? Homer inexplicably doesn't want to sleep with his wife, leaving Marge like this cat in heat trying to jump his bones. The only good thing about this episode is that sweet, sweet mystery hallway lore. By the time we get to season 33, even Lisa is accusing her parents of being in a rut. They've become too comfortable with each other. Their lives have become boring, and they don't do new things together. Pixelated and Afraid is a modern masterpiece, and this framing is part of the reason why. That it seems like Lisa raises a good point, and allows Homer and Marge to prove that they do still have it. They have an unshakable bond, and being comfortable with each other doesn't mean the spark is gone. We get one of the rare glimpses of what Marge sees in this guy. His sense of loving devotion, without forcing some contrived bungle. Deep down, I think Homer feels Marge is too good for him, and that he's lucky she's willing to be with him. So we get stories like I Married Marge, when he leaves her to go out in the world, earn an income, and come back a real man. He feels emasculated by not being able to provide for his family. In A Millhouse Divided, Kirk gets in his head about what makes his marriage so special, and why it won't end up like theirs. In Husband and Knives, when Marge is successful, these other guys convince him she'll eventually upgrade to a better husband. Each of these stories pushes Homer to be proactive and do something dramatic. Go get in Mr. Burns' face, set up a second wedding, get a bunch of horrible plastic surgery. Oh look, it's that meme. Notably, Marge has no idea there is even a problem in any of these, and ultimately soothes these insecurities. They're kinda like those misunderstanding plots, with Marge out of the picture, but you know, with actual introspection. That Homer-Marge balance is my big sticking point when it comes to their fights on this show. I confess, I did this video because I've never been a fan of these Marriage Crisis episodes. I couldn't put my finger on why they are so unsatisfying. Maybe subconsciously it's this thing, where it reminds you of when your parents fought, or all of your own stupid romantic blunders over the years. But it's not the conflict itself that is so tiring. Conflict drives almost every episode. It's the series' perspective on Homer and Marge as a couple. The show does treat Homer like he isn't good enough for her. That Homer is bad at fulfilling Marge's needs, and Marge is the good one. This is literally the text of some episodes. In real life, there are obviously couples like this, but for a TV series, this dynamic becomes tiresome, especially over such a long period of time. I like Homer. I don't like seeing him this way. And let's be clear, this video is not a defense of Homer, arguing that they beat up on him too much. It's clear through his actions that he deserves this criticism. But because he is consistently so much worse than Marge at his marriage, they struggle in making conflicts with actual depth. Homer learns the same lessons over and over again. And this isn't only negatively affecting Homer's characterization. Since he is the protagonist of almost all of these, it further minimizes Marge's role. In Marriage Crisis episodes, Homer is the star and Marge is just the love interest. That's a crappy way to do your romantic comedy, especially for marriage, and The Simpsons struggles in finding her meaningful things to do in these plots. The only time they seem to care about Marge's POV is when they do a love triangle, because maybe Homer will lose her. Without that third party involved, she's treated like a relationship MacGuffin to be won over. That's why I get excited for stuff like A Streetcar Named Marge or Lucas, where one of these fights is told from her point of view. To their credit, these later seasons has done a better job showing Marge's perspective on her marriage, and letting both characters have their moments to shine. The show has been improving in this regard. Basically, we don't need any more stories about Homer not being good enough for Marge. They're repetitive, boring, repetitive, and they give Marge nothing to do. Did I mention they're repetitive? If they're going to do Marriage Crisis number 77, please, please, please try to find a fresh take on their marriage. It's not season 3 anymore. Homer and Marge are an old married couple now. Maybe they should be treated like one.